happy about it because we've talked about it during the workshops. I was checking what was being said, and there was something, a statement that was recurrent, which is neoliberalism does not lead anywhere, especially for social majorities within Spain and Europe. And one of its characteristics is austerity. And this is the topic of this plenary session. We are going to talk about austerity. We will try to avoid these austerity measures to make sure that they belong to the past. This morning, I said that ahead of the elections, the European elections, we have the opportunity to show that we are united and that we can make sure that our policies guarantee economic and sustainable growth. In order to make it a little bit more complex, we also need to create green and decent jobs. And in order to determine the government's role in this new scenario, I'd like to introduce 5 amazing speakers. So let's give them a round of applause. Bas Eickhout, Melanie Vogel, Sven Giegold, Esther Lynch, and Ernest Urtasun. A big round of applause for them, please.
So, good afternoon, everyone. You see a lot of more names and less chairs. That doesn't mean that we're going to stop the music at a certain moment and see who's left. It means that we also have some video contributions, and there's also someone online. I think it was explained very well what we are going to do today, this afternoon. We are now going to focus on, okay, we are talking a lot about the green transition, and we just heard the Commissioner also talking very positive about the green transition and the Green Deal delivering. That's also his job, of course, to tell that the Commission is doing a great job. So that's good that he did that, but I think in this discussion we are also going to put some question marks on some of the working of the Green Deal, especially about making sure that indeed no one is left behind, dearly. Because this has become a bit of an empty statement quite often. I mean, everyone wants to claim that we are leaving no one behind, but what does that mean in reality? And we're going to discuss that in 2 parts. In one part, we are going to focus more on the job creation, that yes, that is happening and can happen, but then still the challenges we're having to make sure that those are really quality jobs. If you are moving from an old economy to a new economy, it doesn't necessarily automatically mean that the new economy, you have the same rights, you have the same place in a society. So this is something that sometimes also, and I have to admit here, the Greens sometimes have been a bit too simplistic in, like, oh, we create new jobs and it will be fine. But that's not true. Creating new jobs really also requires creating new quality jobs in the new sectors, fighting for the same rights that have been fought for decades before in the old economy. And I think that is going to be one of the topics of the first part. The second part, we will move much more to fighting inequalities in our society. Because if we are doing a green transition in a society that is so unequal, we could lead to a further unequal society if we do not pay attention to that. And of course that also is very much linked to a very huge necessity for investments. And are European policies in place to really create that room for investments? I think we know the answer, but we also want to see what can be done about that. So how we're going to do that is we have 4 excellent speakers which I will introduce afterwards. But first what I'm going to do is start a video by the first speaker who will introduce the first topic on quality jobs and delivering on the green jobs. That's Olivier de Schutter. He couldn't be here, so he's leaving us a video message, and he will focus more on the element of the quality jobs that are necessary. And Olivier de Schutter is a professor in Belgium, Louvain, but he has also worked very many years for the UN as a food ambassador. So he will now start first, and for that, I hope the video will come.
Thank you for allowing me to take part in this Green Social Summit convened in Madrid. The question we face is the following. How can we ensure the ecological transformation whilst respecting social justice, whilst combating poverty and reducing inequalities? Now, I believe there are two views as to how this question can be answered. A first view is that we should move as swiftly as possible towards decarbonizing society, towards reducing the loss of biodiversity and the depletion of resources, and then compensate post hoc, if you wish, as an afterthought, the workers impacted by these changes or the low-income households who are often the most severely affected. Now, this answer is one that all too often creates distrust against solutions imposed top-down. It is also an answer that is not very credible if we consider that households living on low incomes, often as a result of lack of information, lack of documentation, poor digital literacy, are not well placed to actually benefit from the compensatory measures that are intended to protect them. And this is what we call the non-take-up of rights, which is very important in the field of social protection. Moreover, this first answer, this first way of looking at the challenge we face may be a missed opportunity. Instead, I would suggest that we can provide a very different answer, one that sees the ecological transformation of societies as an opportunity for reducing poverty and for combating inequalities. And we can do this if we seek to focus on what I call in a report to the United Nations General Assembly of October 2020, triple dividend measures. These measures are measures that do three things at once. First, reducing our ecological footprint. Secondly, creating jobs, particularly for people with low levels of qualification. And thirdly, measures that ensure that goods and services that are indispensable for a decent life are affordable for low-income households. And such measures exist. For example, if we invest in the retrofitting of buildings to ensure that the energy required to heat buildings will be reduced, we, of course, reduce our ecological footprint. We create jobs in the construction sector. And thirdly, we ensure that the electricity bills for households living on low incomes will be reduced as a result of such investments. So this is typically a triple dividend measure. Or to take another example, if we invest in public transport, that means reducing pollution from individual cars. That means, secondly, creating jobs in order to staff the trains, the buses, the trams, the metros, and in order to create the infrastructures required for public transportation schemes. And it means that the right to mobility will not be a privilege of the few, but will instead be affordable for all. To achieve this, and to ensure that not only no one will be left behind, but also, and more importantly, that we focus on the worst off first, we should ensure an effective participation of people in poverty in the design, implementation, and assessment of the measures effectuating the ecological transition. And that is essential for two reasons. Not only to overcome the capture of political influence by major economic elites, but also to ensure that the measures that will achieve the ecological transformation of societies will be well informed by the views of people in poverty, will be thus more legitimate, more effective in achieving their objectives, as they will be nourished by the lived experiences of people in poverty. This may sound utopian, and some would like to say we should focus on realities, not on such utopian views, of how to combine the ecological transformation of societies with social justice? Well, let me answer quoting the words of Heinrich Böll, the awardee of the Nobel Literature Prize of 1972, who once wrote, "Our utopias also are part of reality." Thank you.
Cuesta como una camiseta de Ralph Lauren, es verdad.
Thanks a lot. And now we sit again because now, yeah, sorry, we have to do some choreography with videos and also online. But now let's go to the panel discussion on the first element on jobs and whether and how we should really reap the benefits of creating new jobs, creating green jobs, but how do we make sure that these are going to be green quality jobs? I will introduce the speakers first, and on my right is, and I don't think she needs any introduction, Esther Lynch. You have been working so many years already in the European Confederation, the European Trade Union Confederation, now as a Secretary General, but many years before that already. And I think most experience of all of us in all the discussions, in negotiations around wage policy and collective bargaining. So I would like to have a very warm welcome for Esther Lynch. Calling in from Berlin, I guess. You never know with Sven Giegold where he is exactly in Germany, but he should be now there, and I hope we get him on the screen. Otherwise, it's just a voice from far away. I'm just waiting until I see Sven, to be very honest. Yes, look, there's Sven. Is it Berlin, Sven? Is it Berlin? No, it doesn't look like it, no. Anyhow. Sven Giegold is since December 21, he's State Secretary at the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Protection. Before that, he was member of the European Parliament, so we have been working a couple of years together. So that's why I can sometimes afford a silly joke to a State Secretary of Germany, of course, but I know he always returns the favor, so I'm not worried. So Sven Giegold, great having you here, sort of. Applause, people.
Ah, mira.
Then we have Melanie Vogel. Well, she was introduced this morning already, so I think you all know her, but for those who don't know, she's of course co-chair of the European Green Party. She has been working in the European Parliament, so we know each other a couple of years as well, but I think also much more interesting now, she is also in the French Senate, and one of the youngest senators. To be very honest, that's easy. But nevertheless, Melanie, also welcome to you. And the last speaker is on my left, on your right, but also always on my left. Anne Soetersen, also member of European Parliament and also a dear colleague for many years already, since 2014. But you may know him as the spokesperson of Sumar, so why should I talk longer than introducing you? Thank you, Ernest. Given the time, and I want to apologize for that, there is no chance for interaction with the audience, so that's a bit of a pity. Apologies for that. What we're going to do is having these two sessions, and what I'm going to ask is that everyone is saying something on that in the order of first Esther on the quality of jobs and the green transition and what needs to be done to really make sure that these are also quality jobs created in new sectors and that this green transition is not just new jobs but quality new jobs. Esther, you have the floor.
Thanks so much, and it's great to be here in Madrid, and it's almost like the fight for Europe. This is ground central of the fight for Europe and what it will be, and I'm really happy to be here representing workers and their trade unions, because what we need now is a movement of movements. We all need to join forces to create a fair future. Look, we know two things that will definitely work. One of those that definitely works is making sure that workers can join a union and can bargain for a just transition in their job. To do that, they need to be equipped with information, so they need a right to information. They also need to be equipped with rights to training, so they need to be able to be guaranteed that whatever the solutions that are needed for them to have a path to a fair future, that they can afford to take those up. One of the things that we know from talking to workers is that they don't have the information. They're nearly always the last people to hear. Often they're sitting at home and hear it on the news, on the TV, that their job is about to go. And when they do know, the second problem that they face, they can't get time off for training, they can't afford the training, or the training is just not available for them. So collective bargaining, making sure that workers can join the union and have agency and can be advocates in their own change. That's one really important measure. The second thing we know that will work is that investments in companies need to happen. The companies, either through creation of the new jobs or the transition of the existing jobs. But there can't be any blank checks anymore. Those investments need to come with conditions. And those conditions have to be that the jobs that are created are good jobs, quality jobs, jobs with the types of terms and conditions of employment that the brown jobs have. The green jobs need to be as good as the brown jobs. And the way in which we know that we can secure that is through making sure that when the investments or the subsidies or the grants or the public procurement, the tenders are given, that we make sure that quality jobs, jobs where there's investment in people, jobs where there's respect of people, that's an absolute legal binding condition that goes with those investments. So they're the two things that we're here to call for: the right to join a union, the right to collectively bargain, and that no company should get access to public money other than it's living up to its responsibilities.
Thanks a lot, Esther. Turning to you now, Sven, somewhere in Germany. Your background was not telling much on where that is. So you have the floor, and let's hope we can hear you. You go, Sven. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, Bas. I hope you can hear me.
You're good. Yes.
Yeah, great. As you can see from the stones, it's not far from your home, actually, and it's still the small village you already know, my dear. Beyond that, what I would like to share is the green transition, as the Commissioner said, is happening. And it is happening at a speed which we all didn't expect. As from the Ministry for Economy and Climate Action, I can only say for us it is of course a huge concern to be faced with such a shortage of energy converting into higher prices, which is putting industry in all the countries which made major mistakes to be too dependent on fossil fuels into great difficulty. So this means what we are seeing is production is going down from energy intensive industry much faster than anyone planned or wanted. And of course those countries which were dependent too much on fossil gas, in particular from Russia, are hit hardest. So what we are doing here is to help industry to cope with this challenge. And this means we have set up special programs under the framework of European cooperation to invest into green technologies so that steel companies are converting to green steel. Cement is converting to less energy intensive cement. That chemical industry is converting from CO2 intensive production methods to those which are greener. And this is critical, and we support this with a lot of public money, and we also help to support industry on that way. I would also like to stress that keeping industry alive is also important for the regions as well as the workers, and helping them to convert to new production technologies which create safe and sustainable jobs in the future. And at least in the German context, these are usually unionized jobs, so well-paying jobs. it is not a green thing to let these industry die. I would also like to stress that we need affordable energy prices to keep these industries in Europe. But assuring that the energy prices are affordable is not in contradiction with the speed of building renewables and our energy future. And it's in the interest of no one in the green movement to let industry die from Putin's awful attack on Ukraine. So, second point I would like to make is that what our colleague from ITUC just demanded is what we are doing. So our government has decided to propose law which will require all companies which go for federal public money, basically to be respecting the collective bargaining outcomes. In horrible German, this is Bundestariftreuegesetz. So this means if you want to serve, I know you make a joke now, Bas. We create long words in German, but it means it's very important. So if you get an order from the state, if you go for public tenders, you have to pay the negotiated wage. And in the context of Germany, this means we are ending with public policy sitting idle aside that the number of unionized jobs went down and down and down. And that we do together with socialists, which is less surprising, but also with the liberals. And second, we increase by law the minimum wage to 12 euros. This was from knowing that Germany didn't have a federal minimum wage for a very long time and now has one of the highest in Europe, is also a great achievement of this government. And we also increase spending and reform the spending for regions in transition and help workers with federal programs to retrain from brown jobs to green jobs. So basically, we try to keep our industry, help it to transform, and help the workers and their regions to transform as well. And I think this is what you can do when you are in government. And this is why it's really paying to be in government, not only for the ecological transition, but also that it's done in a way that is good for the economy and fair to the people. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sven, and it is really good that you are also pointing out what you are really changing now in Germany, and we all know what a pain that can be, or well, we probably hardly can imagine, but thanks for that, and we'll come back to you for the second topic as well. We now move to Melanie on this topic, and also maybe reacting to what has been said.
Yeah, thanks. So when it comes to the basic question, how do we ensure that we create green jobs and that green jobs are good jobs? I think the first thing that we also have to do, we as politicians, is to ensure predictability and planification. I think for most people, the problem is not the fact that they are going to change their job. The problem is not the fact that they are going to do another job, that they are going to reskill or upskill or whatever. The problem is that, and that's what you say, they don't know. So we need to be able to planify that not only at national level, but at European level, and to show people that you have a credible plan and they know what is going to happen and when. The second thing is, of course, to empower workers to be part of this transition. I don't know any sector of the economy with quality job that was not fought through and that was not won because of unions and because of workers' fights. I'm not aware of anything like this existing in the economy. So if we want green jobs to be good jobs with good working conditions, with decent pay, we need to be sure that people are going to be able to join a union, but also that they are going to be part of really strong collective bargaining. I don't see any other way to ensure that we are not going to have a transition from good, decent working conditions to something that is not regulated. And that's something that we have to ensure from the very beginning. Because we know how hard it is when a sector of the economy is already created and when people are already working there to change the working condition. The last thing, and it's echoing you said we need trainings, and that's clear. Everybody talks about skills. We heard the European Year of Skills. Yeah, skills are very important. But to gain skills, you have to have trainings available, and you have to ensure that workers can access those training during their working hours, and that they're not the one paying for them. But also, and I think that's something that we need to say with honesty, it's not going to be the same jobs. It's not going to be all the same people going from one job to another. For some people, we need to be credible about the safety net so that they can know that if there is not a job opportunity because they are 62, because they were working in an industry that is not going to move to another sector where they can actually find a job. We need to have a solution for these people. And we need to tell them that we have a solution to maintain their lives, to maintain their purchasing power, and to ensure that they will not lose income. And I think at least with these three things, we have them with us, and we can ensure that, yes, we have green jobs that are compatible with the planet boundaries, but that in these green jobs, you have workers' rights.
Thank you. And last but not least on this round, Ernest.
Well, thank you so much, Bas. Big pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. Okay, I'm going to explain a bit very briefly the study case of the Spanish evolution of the labor policies, which I think is pretty interesting. You know, during many years, this country was told that the only source of prosperity and growth was cheap labor. These was the policies that the previous conservative government did, which was basically a massive wage devaluation during years, which created precarious jobs and which created a massive amount of unemployment. Spain reached 24% of unemployment for many years. So what actually the current progressive government managed to show under the leadership of Yolanda Díaz in the labor market is that actually you could achieve a much greater level of prosperity with changing completely your labor policy. So basically in the last 4 years, Spain has raised the statutory minimum wage by 47%. 47%. When we wanted to do that, everybody was telling us that we were crazy, that we were going to kill the competitiveness of the Spanish economy. Know what? No. Do you want to know what? The exports of Spain are at a high record, and the unit labor cost, which is a measurement for competitiveness in relation to the cost of your labor, is at the lowest level. So it is pretty working. And the other thing we did, which was very important, was a labor reform that basically killed a long-lasting illness of the Spanish labor market, which was abuse of temporarity, which made that our young people were just going from one temporary contract to another, and that was completely disastrous because it made our labor market purely precarious, and it made for young people and for older people impossible to have a certain stability in their careers and their lives. So with the labor market reform, we changed that. So now we are at the highest level of creation of permanent contracts in the history of Spain. So now at the moment, with all these labor policies, which is improving the life conditions of millions of workers in the country, you have Spain actually being one of the economies that is best performing in the whole EU. So what we have been told for years, that you needed to go for wage evaluation in the south in order to guarantee certain levels of prosperity, was a lie. And Spain has shown that another kind of politics was possible, and we have been extremely successful with that. And why I'm saying that, Bas, is because I think this is also the only way to secure the green transition. You cannot secure and go through the challenges of the green transition in jobs if you base your labor policies in precariousness and wage devaluation. It's completely impossible. So you cannot train your workers towards the green transition. You cannot push the transition in certain sectors that you need to do and reskill your workers to be adapted to the new economy. You cannot create the new green jobs that we need to create in some sectors if you don't base your policies in having workers' rights, permanent contracts, stability of your labor market. So I think now that Spain is much more prepared to do that, but that is because progressive policies on the labor market has put Spain at a much better condition to do this transition for the green jobs. So, and that will be my conclusion and my final conclusion, in order to secure green jobs, you need labor rights. In order to secure transition in the labor market towards the new green economy, you need labor stability and labor rights. And this is something that we need to defend, and those things go hand in hand. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for also giving that insight from Spain. And indeed, maybe you should become spokesperson. It's how you put that out. Yeah, it's a good idea. Now, so I think that gives us a broad overview, and I think also quite some similarities here in where the challenges are and what really needs to happen. But I think a couple of you already mentioned it, and that is also a good bridge to the second part of the discussion. Quite often we are talking about investments, investment needs. And as you said, Esther, there's no time for blank checks anymore, but the investment need is there. And Sven also mentioned that already. But then, of course, we need to talk about, is the current economic policy framework right in place? In Brussels, we know how to make everything sound very boring. We call that economic governance, but it's so essential on what's going to happen really with the spending of countries and member states. And I think that is good to turn towards too. But before we do that, we have a video again. Yes, because the ones who are attending very well noticed, of course, that there is still one person being mentioned and you haven't heard her, and that's Daniela Gabor. She's professor from Bristol, from the University of West England, and she's working on microeconomics. And I would say, of course, I have to say that for everyone, follow everyone on Twitter, or X you have to say nowadays, but she's really someone to follow because she has a funny way of making macroeconomics really accessible, and that in a very progressive interpretation. And in that sense, always a pleasure to read her, but also to listen to her, and that's what we're going to do now. So Daniela Gabor also has a video message. We move again.
Hi, everybody. Let me start by saying I'm really sorry I cannot be with you today, and that I'm grateful to the organizers for inviting me to share some thoughts. In the face of the existential climate crisis we are going through, most would agree that the question is no longer why spend public money for decarbonization, but rather how to spend public money. Let me tell you, there is a bad way of spending public money. One which is less politically ambitious, so everybody's doing it, with little recognition that it won't work. And there is a correct, a right way of spending public money, one that will give us a fast and just transition, one where it's not just economics that works, but also the social. It works for people as well as for companies. Now, the most common way of spending public money, as for instance in President Macron's recent climate plan, it goes under the heading incentives, not regulations. The idea is that we spend public money to nudge corporations, including fossil capital, in the right direction. We give them subsidies, public procurement privileges, loans, guarantees, and tax incentives, and we expect a green trickle down. We expect public investment and public spending to trigger private green investment and create green jobs. And everybody's happy, we get a pain-free supply-side transition. But this trust in nudging markets is bound to fail. It won't deliver rapid decarbonization. I think we have seen it at work over the past year, the same year where we've had record fossil fuel profits. And I think more importantly, it also risks a popular backlash. Voters will turn against green initiative if they believe that these primarily benefit corporations. A better way to spend public money is to recognize that European citizens need green public goods delivered by the state. This means using public money directly for the public good, through green public transport, through green public renovation programs, including, for example, free heat pumps, through green education and health. Incentives for private investment, I think, are important, but they need to be paired with regulation. It is a false dichotomy to say either incentives or regulations, because we know that some sectors need to shrink fast. The European Commission knows it, the Central Bank knows it, the European Council has called on the European Commission to design a taxonomy of dirty activities that need to be minimized, whose carbon footprints needs to shrink. There is a general consensus, or there used to be until recently a general consensus, that we need to penalize dirty activities. And in doing so, we will also increase the pool of private capital available for green investments. This will also build state capacity, and I think this is very important to bear in mind when we talk about public money and spending. We need state capacity to decide which incentives go to whom, to distinguish between good performers and poor performance, to help the good performers and to regulate those who are delaying in their transition to green activities. And we need state capacity in general to organize a decarbonization for households that receives their support. Let me be clear. The allocation of public money for decarbonization is a political choice. And the only alternative that is realistic, that does not risk derailing popular momentum, is a lot more public money for public green goods and a very careful strategy that pairs incentives with regulations in order to reorient private capital investment from dirty towards green activities. Thank you very much.
I think Daniela laid out the challenges on this part of our European policy framework very well, and now I will give the panelists the opportunity again to react on it, but also, of course, give their own, I would say, 2 cents on really what is crucial here. And we do it in the reverse order, so that means we will start now first with you, Ernest.
Thank you so much, Bas. Okay, so the first question that we need to answer when it comes to green investment, and who is going to do that investment? Who is going to do those public investment to create these green public goods? Okay, there are 2 options. Either the EU provides new instruments for these investments, either we allow member states to do it. Now, the risk that we have ahead of us for the next years is that neither of both does those investments, which is what worries us a lot, particularly as Greens in the European Parliament in the debate of the reform of the fiscal rules. Why? Because we've been calling now for greater investment at EU level, and that would mean creating a new fund like the recovery facility that we created during the pandemic to do that investment at the European level, which is something that we favor. We actually have a very nice policy paper from the Green Group explaining very well how this should be set. But the resistance of the Conservatives in doing that is very big. And on the other hand, you know that the fiscal rules at EU level have been suspended until now, so member states have had the capacity to invest at national level. But again, the fiscal rules need to be re-established in the next year. And we have again the fiscal hawks calling for putting debt reduction and debt consolidation at the forefront. So what is the risk? The risk is that there is no European investment if no funds and new instruments are created, and that the hawks impose no fiscal rules that actually impose austerity at European level. If that is the policy mix for the next years, we're going to fail the economic transition because nobody is going to do those investments. So what are we now fighting for? What are we demanding? Is that we actually allow both the European and the national level to do those investments. And those are basically the 2 main driven ideas that we have been fighting at European level. We want this fund that, as I mentioned, at European level to do investment, public investment, to create European public goods, because many of those public goods need to be European, and in that sense, European investment is needed. But again, you need to allow member states as well to do that investment. And for that, in the reform of the fiscal rules, we have been calling now for many, many years for a specific treatment in the investments at national level for those investments that go directly to the ecologic transition. You cannot, because otherwise you will not allow member states to do that transition, and then we're going to go for a failure. So that's why both things at European and at national level need to happen, and this needs to be reflected in the reform of the fiscal rules that we are going to do in the coming years. And my final point on all this debate is also that in order to secure those investments, we need a strong reform of our taxation system. Because this is the other side of the coin. This is the other side of the coin. We need income in order to do investments. And we know, and this is one of the main priorities also of the Green Group at European level, we need to continue building on fighting tax havens, on going for further harmonization of our corporate taxation system, of taxing wealth, which is a debate that we as Greens at the European level want to open. We need more taxation on wealth in order to have sufficient income, public income, in order to do those investments. So voila, those are things that I think are urgent for a progressive agenda at EU level, because otherwise, if we do not allow and have those instruments for investment, the green and ecological transition can simply not be done. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Ernest. Also, thank you for not looking at me when you mentioned tax haven. I'm from the Netherlands. But I think that's, by the way, a good thing of the Green family, is that we are fighting at the Dutch level against the tax havens in the Netherlands as much as others are fighting the tax havens. So I think that's also, it's lovely to be consistent in a political family. Melanie, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. Unfortunately, I think I'm going to say more or less the same thing that Ernest said, but not as good as him. But I was really, no, but that's also very reassuring that we are basically on the same line. No, but first of all, maybe just something about the narrative about this investment issue in the green transition. I think there is a dangerous narrative that is being set by the opponent of the green transition, by those who want to keep the status quo. It's that it's very expensive. It is very expensive, it requires a lot of money, it's so expensive, we cannot afford it. Well, we know the reality is that the climate inaction, we cannot afford it. Like, we can really not, it's impossible. Humanity cannot afford climate inaction. The thing is, on the way, if we don't do climate action, on the way, because the planet is not going to disappear from one night to the other day, it's the poorest people and the most vulnerable people who are going to pay the price. And the thing is, climate inaction is much more expensive in absolute numbers. It is much more expensive than climate action. Studies say climate inaction between 5% to 20% of GDP. That's huge, and it's increasing. The least we act, the more expensive it becomes. Climate action is much less expensive, actually. Climate action is assessed, it depends what you count, whatever, but about 1% of GDP. So it is much more reasonable from an economic point of view. It's less expensive, much cheaper, and the sooner we do it, the cheaper it is to do climate action. So I think, like, in the way we speak about it as well, we have to, get out of this narrative that it is so expensive. It requires investment, but we invest much more on destroying the planet currently. The second thing is that, then when you have said that, there are two things: where the money comes from and where it goes. And we have a problem on both streams. Where it comes from, mostly from workers, not so much from capital gains, not so much from wealthy people. And where it goes, mostly to rich people, mostly to companies that still destroy the planet, and not so much on public services. So we need to change both things, to create a fairer tax system and to invest where we have to invest. And I wanted to say just one thing about, I talked about it briefly this morning, about the yellow vest movement in France. Why did it happen? It was triggered by rise of gas prices. Because we hadn't invested anything in making people not dependent on their cars. So if for decades and decades and decades you don't do anything to invest in the railroad system, to invest in public services, to invest in alternatives, and then at the end suddenly you say, yeah, now it's going to be more expensive, yeah, people do not accept it. The last thing that I wanted to say is that I think, and it comes back to what Olivier said about this triple dividend thing, I hope that's okay if I call it a thing. We need to transform the way our social security system are working to make sure that our social security system are first protecting people from the new risks that are created by the climate crisis, but also tend to contribute to diminishing the climate crisis. And I have one example, I'm obsessed with it, but you know, it's the case of most politicians who work on the topic, then they're obsessed with it and they think that's the most important thing in the world. But we are working in France on a proposal to have social security providing access to healthy food to people. So basically, it's a measure with your social security card, you get access to a certain amount of healthy food per month. And it made me, now I'm going to call it a triple dividend because I think it's fancy, but it's exactly this. It reduces social inequalities, it improved public health, and it accelerates the agricultural transition. So it's exactly this type of measure, if you change the perspective, where you can have a big impact pretty quickly, actually.
On to you now, Sven, because we know that this is not the easiest discussion to have also in a government in Germany where the Minister of Finance is, well, I think, yeah, you could call him a hawk. So, and you need to work with, and you need to work with him. So it's also very good to hear from you now on how that discussion is.
So it's even worse because as a state secretary, I'm not a politician anymore. And I'm obliged and bound by political restraint. Can you imagine that? Restraint and myself is quite a contradiction in terms. And that is, makes it a bit difficult with your opening question. So clearly, I got to know Christian Lindner during the coalition talks, and he is a much more surprising figure than his past.
Yeah. We lost you, Sven. We hope we can get back to you. Because it was very interesting what you're going to say on Christian Lindner, but it was just not allowed in this room. So I don't know whether you're completely gone or we don't know. I have to look there. Otherwise, I propose Esther.
Someone kicked me out. Yeah. I don't know who, but it wasn't me. How long was?
The moment you started to become positive about Christian Lindner, you were cut off.
Yeah. I was, but you didn't miss much because I didn't say that much. I only said he's a more complex person than his public image. And this I saw in the coalition talks. And what we achieved as German Greens in this respect is to have an opening of the German position on the reform of the Maastricht rules. And what we are saying is, of course, the Eurozone needs binding rules on debt and deficit. So that's in the treaties, we will not change it, and it's also economically needed. But what we achieved is to treat investment better than so far. Because so far what we have seen with the European fiscal framework is that everywhere in Europe the investment rate of the state went down. So since the Maastricht Agreement, European member states are Euro member states in particular are investing less. And what we need for the transition is to give them space to invest more. And what Germany is now saying is we want binding rules. We do not want that the European Commission
It was going fine until, yeah, the second round is a bit more complicated than the first round. The first round really went smooth. Unfortunately now the second round is a bit more complicated, Sven. I hope you are quickly back because it was interesting what you're going to say now on the German position on finding that balance between setting rules on the one hand. Greece is coming in there on the right. But at the same time also creating space for investments, and exactly that part you were cut off, so to say. So I'm not sure we can get Sven back because it would be interesting to have that.
It's, do you hear me again?
Yeah, so you were, yeah.
It's a bit, I don't know what's, I'm not doing anything, the connection is not stable enough. So, but what I was saying is that what we achieved is that in the German negotiation position, there is now not only the insistence on rules which limit debt and deficit, but also to give more space for public investment. And this is part of the coalition agreement, and we hope that this will help in the Council to have a more investment-friendly reform. So, and that is also part of compromise building. We have not got, obviously, a green position in this, but we have left our footprint in the German government position. And it's also important to say that in Spain and in many other countries which have been suffering from austerity. So German Greens are also with these changes trying to achieve so that Europe does not get back into excessive austerity. I would also like to say that, of course, the green transition and it is mainly an affair of private investment. I'm saying that because this was not noted enough. Most of the investment for greening the economy will, of course, be private. And we achieved great things with the Green Deal in order to improve the conditions for these green investments. Because what we in the end need is that when you invest in green activities, it pays better off than if you invest into brown activities. And this is what we actually managed to do with those parts of the Green Deal which are already voted upon. For instance, the emission trading system, but also with the rules on renewable energy, which will require everyone in Europe to radicalize their investment spending in renewables. And we are going to do this now also for other sectors. We achieved already great progress on cars. We are working on the building rules. And all this will lead by creating a mixture of price signals and sectorial regulation. It will contribute to boosting investment. But our greatest problem at the moment is that a few years ago, the interest rates were historically low. And this was, of course, incredibly helpful to allow green investment. And now we are doing the Green Deal activities under the conditions of much higher interest rates, which will hit public budgets as well as companies or private households investing in the green transition. And this makes it so critical to get the policy mixture right. And to conclude on one key idea is, because of this, we need now industrial policy in order to make industry successful in this transition and investment spending. And therefore the Green Deal, after changing the relative prices and now entering into sectorial regulation, the next wave of the Green Deal has to be green industrial policy. The Commission has already suggested some elements for this, but from my perspective, it will be absolutely key that we do not only create the right incentives for greening our households and industry and the different other parts of our economy, but to make sure that the production of green goods and services is actually happening in Europe. So what we need is climate action made in a green Europe. And for this we need a wave of industrial policy tools, to which also the right framework for financing the public side of that belongs. And there we can closely build allies with companies, but also with trade unions in order to make that work. And from my perspective, this is the natural central theme of the European elections. So how to make...
Thanks a lot, Sven. Sorry for cutting, but in the end, you're getting totally delayed. So I really would like to thank you. Thank you very much, Sven. Just to make clear, Sven, we heard you everything, and thank you really for also including industrial policy at the end as a central theme, where you want to build alliances also with the green policy makers, industry and the trade unions, which of course can also bridge very nicely to Esther, who is last now to speak. But I once more want to thank you, Sven, for joining in and also overcoming the hiccups in technology, which shows the need for investments once more. So thank you very much, Sven, once more.
I'm going to take the ball that was bounced to me by Sven. So the ball that was bounced was a green industrial policy for Europe, and we need that for sure, and it needs to be one of the key proposals, demands, commitments that we try to get all MEPs to sign up to. It's certainly one of the 12 commitments that the ETUC adopted just yesterday in Madrid. And what we mean by a green industrial policy is one that creates high road competition. And what we mean by that is that workers are not widgets. They live in houses, they need schools, they need hospitals, they need transport, they need all of the things that makes it possible for you to go to work. I met with the yellow vests, and at the time what struck me was they had been forced out of their communities to live way outside from where the workplace was, with no public transport, with times that they had to be in work, which required them to have a car, and then on top of everything else, it was going to cost them so much they wouldn't even be able to put food on the table. And so the green industrial policy needs to be all-encompassing about all of that. And my final point is the threat to that is that if at the end of this year, the new economic governance rules make it so that nobody can spend any money on any of this, we'll be left trying to manage the impossible, because we'll be trying to introduce things that need both laws and money, but we'll have neither. We'll have neither, because we'll be back to what we had under Barroso, Because if the new rules are not adopted by the end of this year, it's not that things stay the same, which is what normally happens, but no, it's that things get 100 times worse than they are at the moment, and we go back to everything that we had. I don't know if everybody here is old enough to remember what happened under Barroso, but I do, because I lived through it in Ireland. And what it meant was a reduction in minimum wage, a removal of collective bargaining, no money for schools, no money for hospitals, no money for anything. No money for anything that mattered. And what's worse, there was less taxes on people who could well afford it. So we need to, at all costs, make sure that doesn't happen. And that's why you've seen we are against austerity. We're going to be marching on the streets in Paris on the 13th of October. We're going to be on the streets in Brussels in December, just before the decision is made. And as I've said, we need to be a movement of movements. We need joined up. We need to support each other, encourage each other. Not going to agree with everything on everything, but really that's why I'm so happy to be here today. And I'm glad the Spanish trade union leaders are also here. But thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Esther, also for that call for action, because indeed, as you rightfully said, the discussions on the reform of the Stability and Growth Pact are happening as we speak and need to be concluded by the end of this year, otherwise we fall into the old rules, and indeed, no one wants that. I'm even old enough to remember that. We now try to at least, because of course this was very much listening to everyone, which I hope was as entertaining as we tried to make it be. But of course now we would still like to involve you all, and that means you need to get your phone out and get to menti.com, and I hope it will get on the screen now, because we are going to ask now of you, what comes to your mind when you hear tax the rich? That's not the right one, right? That's, I mean, yeah, we can say something, but something comes to mind for sure. But the big question should be, what keywords that sticks to your mind after this debate should be the word. So, yeah, slightly different. I think this is referring to another panel. So, nevertheless, go still to menti.com.
And the answers could be the same.
It could be that you get the same word cloud. That could be very well, of course. Yeah, it's coming. They need to get the right slide on. So 1 second for... I mean, this was a bit of a challenging session where we had to do a lot of switches.
Well managed, Bas.
Totally relaxed now. So now we just do the last one with menti.com. And
can you tell a joke?
Well, you know, you don't want to have jokes from me, you know, because... Okay, so Melanie, you can... No, but then maybe while we are getting on the right screen, I think I used then the moment to thank you three as well, because otherwise you're sitting here a bit like a lame duck. So I would like to thank Melanie Vogel, people. Esther Lynch, thank you very much. And of course, playing for his home audience, Ernest Uttersan.
And Bas, for the great moderation.
Yeah. Look. And meanwhile, we have the screen on. This was all very well managed. So go on your phone to menti.com and you enter that code that you see on there, so 64833441. And then really put in the words and try to make it short, because then it's more powerful. Try not to use the word the, because then in a word cloud you get only the. So try to stick to as few words as possible. What really now comes to mind after having heard this discussion and this debate, one on the quality of jobs and the green transition and how ensuring that the jobs are really high quality jobs, and secondly also the change in our policies to really create space for investment, both public money and also private money. And then you see what is coming up. I have to say that I immediately see eat the rich and not tax the rich. That's certainly standing out there. It's an interesting, could be an interesting typo, of course, but and it's still working. We now have an input of 70 people. I think I'll just let it grow and let it develop. And I just want to thank everyone in the audience also for this debate. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And stay, and stay. And stay, because I am here now also to introduce you to the next panel. And that is that we're now going to have a talk also with the trade unions, and some already have been seen. And for that, I'm going to give the floor to the Secretary General of the EGP of the European Green Party, Benedetta Di Matte. Thank you very much, and there you are.